The Maple Leafs dropped both games this weekend, and some concerning trends are starting to pop up again. We'll detail those trends and help tee up tonight's game against McDavid and the Oilers. We'll discuss all that and more on tonight's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling after that weekend?
Not great. not great. Like
For multiple
I got
reasons.
I got the double whammy this weekend. I put my faith in the wrong people. I don't know why I do it in the first place, but yeah, I do.
Well, for those who maybe, because he's being a little cryptic on that, Dave is not only a Leafs supporter, but also a supporter of the Dallas Cowboys. And the parallels between these two clubs are just amazing, right? Like these are the two kind of top dogs in their sport. The Leafs are clearly, the top team in the National Hockey League. They were just, I believe, 4 billion. I think they were just, or 3 billion maybe. They were just valued at as the top NHL franchise. And then obviously the top NFL franchise is the Dallas Cowboys. But one thing that those two teams share, which is obviously, more disheartening from their fan base perspectives, is they both choke in the playoffs. And just like the Leafs have done year after year after year, same thing can be said about the Dallas Cowboys. And yeah, your beloved Dallas team just got the doors blown off them in front of their own their own home fans. And what's funny is, again, similar team, similar fan base, similar frustrations. And now the conversation in Dallas, a lot of it is stemming around, hey, should we keep the coach? Is Mike McCarthy on the hot seat? We're having some very same conversations here in Toronto. I don't know about you, but it feels like over the course of this last week, after the Leafs drop 3 straight games, they lose over the weekend. Both games drop a 5-3-1 to the Avalanche, and then they end up losing 4-2 to the Red Wings. But they held leads, multi-goal leads in all of these games. Well, I guess they only led by 1 goal the other night against Detroit, but still holding leads and blowing leads. And that's also led to some conversation around Sheldon Keefe and his job security. And I do want to ask you if you think this whole situation, you look at the game against the Islanders, they blow a 2-goal lead. They blow a 3-goal lead on the Avalanche, and then they're up 2-1 on Detroit, and they end up losing that game as well. Is this a big deal, little deal, or no deal? Kind of that trend that's popping up right now for Toronto.
I think it's a big deal because it's not just a few games that we've seen it. It's almost all season, right? How many games have they allowed to go to overtime, right? Like,
Yeah.
the first concern we had, and you rightfully brought it up, what, a month ago?
Yeah, about that. Where's my notebook? I got the numbers on my notebook. Hold on, keep talking.
Like, we brought up their inability to win games in regulation. How, you know what, like at the time, it wasn't like full out panic mode at that point because you know what, they were still getting wins in overtime. They were still finding a way to get points. Now that's starting to catch up on them, right? That inability to get things done within 60 minutes. What it shows is just a lack of just doing the things you need to do as a team that wants to be a serious playoff contender to get things done. You should be beating teams like the Islanders in regulation, a team like the Detroit Red Wings in regulation. Yeah, you know what? The Colorado Avalanche, they're a pretty good team. But you know what you should do? You should beat them when you have a 3-0 lead. That's what good teams do. They don't allow a door to be open for a team like the Colorado Avalanche to come back when you have that advantage. And that's the part that really frustrates me is, and here in what worried me most, hearing Sheldon Keefe after the game talk about how McKinnon and McCarr, they're not in the NHL, they're in a league of their own, they're in another league. Like, look, they're elite, great players, among the best in the league. You also have really good players like in Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner.
Willie's
And
got paid to be that way now. Willie's paid to be that way.
Yeah, and Willie being paid that way too. And you're sitting here acting as if you don't have those types of players. That's what like, I don't know, not many people picked up on what he said, but I don't think it was being talked about enough what he said and how he kind of said it.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, and not that I want to pick on it as that much, but it is kind of interesting when you look at it and you think about how much love he gave to those guys, and it's like they're on another planet, those two, the way that they play, and it's like, hey, you've got a guy who can be that way when he's on his A game as well. The problem is it comes and goes, like Nathan McKinnon right now, he's second in the league in scoring. He's number one in terms of points at 5-on-5, I'm pretty sure. But he also like has been on this stretch here over the course of the last like 6 weeks where he's just been putting up outrageously good performances. And the thing is, Toronto, they have those guys too. To your point, like Austin Matthews is right on par with how good Nathan McKinnon is. Now they don't have a Cale Makar. That's very clear and obvious. Like as good as Morgan Riley is, he's an all-star, which is awesome. He's not a Cale Makar, right?
And not many teams have a Cale Makar.
No, it's Cale Makar, it's Quinn Hughes, it's Adam Fox, and that might be it when you're looking at guys who are just so good on both ends of the ice. There's not many of them out there for sure. So yeah, like it is definitely a little weird to see that being the case. But I mean, Toronto, I just this comes back to the conversation that's always had with this team, and it's a lack of killer instinct. When you're up 3-0, right? You got to get that fourth goal and really put a team away. Got to do it. Has to happen. Now, I'll say this: they didn't really get the power plays that they probably should have to give them more opportunity to score and maybe put that game away. Like that blatant cross check on Austin Matthews was outrageous. Like just, it really baffles me how sometimes you can have calls and like the ref saw it. The ref was right there. Like, come on, don't tell me you didn't see that play. Then even after the game, like even Willie was like, I mean, you look at the penalties, who only got one, kind of bizarre when you look at how physical of a game that turned out to be. And yeah, it's no excuse, obviously. Figure it out at 5-on-5 if you're not getting the penalty calls. But I think because it's the reason why it's a bit more concerning is because if you look at last week, yeah, it was all great, right? Martin Jones looked fantastic. This team, they were able to play a defensive style of hockey that was conducive to winning games and help protecting Martin Jones. And they allowed 5 goals over the course of like that 5-game stretch. But that was against Anaheim and San Jose. Like that, those aren't the greatest teams, right? Those are teams at the bottom of the standings. And I remember coming on this pod like a week ago saying, I'm not ready to anoint Martin Jones the starter just yet and say this guy is, the savior of the season. Well, let's wait and see what happens against top tier quality talent, right? When they start to put pressure, teams that can generate a lot more offense, like the Avalanche, like the Detroit Red Wings, and even the New York Islanders can generate a little bit. Wait to see what they can do. Playoff caliber teams, what the Leafs do against them. And then we could really have more of an understanding of how good this team actually is. And from what I saw over the course of this past weekend, I don't like what I saw, I guess is what I'd say. So I do think that it's kind of a big deal that they are giving up these leads and showing that lack of killer instinct once again against playoff caliber teams. That to me is what's concerning.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it there. When you look at, people were all in awe about what they were doing in California, which look, you give credit for when they have good performances, but when you have teams that clearly view the Leafs as a target or understand where they can exploit this team, that's a concern. Like that, there's no other way to put it. Like Frankie Corrado, if you haven't gone and followed Frankie yet, I don't know what you guys are doing. Like he did such a great breakdown of the game-winning goal for the Red Wings
Yeah.
and how really what it is, and it's been an issue all year for this Leafs team, is when they turn the puck over in their own end. Well, I mean, turn the puck over in general, but most specifically in their own end, they're a disorganized mess when it comes to figuring out who's covering what. How do we prevent a breakdown that leads to a goal? And that to me, good teams figure out those flaws,
Yeah.
right? Colorado certainly took advantage. Like there were so many brain cramps in that game against Colorado. It was like mind-boggling. Like the TJ Brody decided not to touch the puck when there's a delayed penalty. Not too sure what he was thinking there. You
No.
know, the inability to clear the puck out of the zone. How many times has that gone to bite this team in the rear end the last few games? Things like
Lots.
that. Simple things they are not executing. So, like, yes, Sheldon Keefe is getting a lot of flack right now, but the players are not executing simple things. And any coach, no, like the coach change would not change that. The team has to execute those simple
Okay.
things to do it.
I agree. I think we need to have a longer
Mhm.
conversation about the coach. So why don't
Right.
we break, come back? We can get into that because there's a lot of discourse right now about whether or not this team needs to find a new voice. And after these past, few weeks, it's again, it's just the message isn't getting through, right? So is it more so the voice that needs to change as opposed to the system? I don't know. Why don't we have that conversation on the other side? We also got to tee up tonight's game, Leafs in Edmonton. We got McDavid versus Matthews again tonight. Should be a fun game. So we'll tee that up as well in a few moments. But first, we'll hear from one of our show sponsors. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last minute deals, all in prices. Views from receipt and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up until the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last minute seats. And with the Game Time guarantee, it means that you'll get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We're a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast. We got new episodes coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So if you have not subscribed to our podcast yet and you're new to the show, first and foremost, welcome. Hopefully you've enjoyed the content to this point. And if you want more of it, make sure you do subscribe wherever you get your podcast from audio wise. We can also be found on YouTube. Just search up Locked On Leafs, hit subscribe, and receive that daily Leafs content. All right, Dave. We were just about to kind of get into the discourse surrounding Sheldon Keefe. Whenever this team goes in a rut, usually his name gets brought up. And
Mhm.
look, it's because he is one of the longest tenured head coaches in the NHL now. I think he's top five, I want to say, and like longest tenured head coaches in the league, which is insane. He's the longest tenured Canadian coach in the NHL. And it's come with not a whole lot of success. Playoff regular season success, sure. Playoff success, no. So this year seems to be louder, like really, really loud, because we've seen a lot of teams let their coaches go, and it's turned their seasons around, especially Edmonton. We'll get to that in a little
Mhm.
bit when we tee up their game, but they have been on fire ever since they brought in Chris Knobloch. Could a similar situation be the case here in Toronto? I don't know. But where are you at when it comes to the fact that Keefe has had ample opportunity to try and get through to this team? The stars are there, the talent is here, but they're just not executing. Like, what is the situation? Is it like, has he lost? Is his voice just not carrying through the room? Or is it the players, no matter who is behind the bench, isn't going to listen because of who they are? Like, what to you is the situation here?
Well, for me here is like you go into that game against Detroit, second half of a back to back, you blow a lead against the Colorado Avalanche, and one of the first things Sheldon Keefe does is he throws the lines in a complete blender, and it's like, is that really what the focus should be on? Just throwing lines in a blender rather than, you know what? Yeah, take Mark Giordano lineup. He wasn't good, and he's very up there in age and should not be playing as
Yeah,
much as he has been playing.
I did think that was really bizarre also.
Yes.
Like, I had to do a double take. I'm like, these are the lines for tonight's game? What the heck? Like, I get it. They didn't play well in Colorado, but to completely put the lines in a blender, like completely for the following game, in which was Ilya Samsonov's return to the
We
crease.
didn't even talk about Samsonov.
We
Like,
haven't talked about that yet. We will. But to do that in Samsonov's return is just pure lunacy, man. Like, that was just a nutso decision. It clearly backfired because that team was very lackadaisical to come out. You could tell that they're just, there wasn't much cohesion with the group.
yeah.
It was just a bizarre, bizarre look for Sheldon Keefe, I think.
And like he also called out the Tavares line, specifically Willie, saying he took him off because he needed to get him going.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, you know what? They weren't good. And Tavares has been very pedestrian, I think is the best way to put it. The last, since they
Yep.
returned home from the road trip. Hasn't been good. But changing the lines isn't always the solution to getting guys going. Maybe you need to change something about how they're playing, because guess what? You're going to make this change. 2 days later, you're going to revert back to everything back to normal again. So I don't know what changing the lines really does. Maybe that's his way of sending a message. Sure. But to do it like that and to do it just screams, I'm not saying desperation, but it looks disorganized, right? It just almost like he's throwing that out there and hoping for something to change and something to work. It just doesn't scream to me as something that's confident when he does something like that. Look, people like it's intriguing to see Marner playing with Domi. I get that. But you have to think of the Matthew Nyes should not be a fourth liner on this team,
No.
looking at how he's playing.
And
Like
of all
those are the
people,
ramifications of doing things like that.
yeah, like of all the people who have been playing pretty well, like Matthew Nyes is up there. Like, yeah, for him to play 9 minutes and 26 seconds is just ridiculous because he's a really, really good player. But yeah, like Pontus Holmberg, he was rewarded. He'd been playing some
Yeah.
good hockey. He was rewarded with a little, twirl up on the top line, ends up scoring a goal. But yeah, I didn't think it was a smart idea. I don't know what Keith was thinking. But Samsonov. So we didn't actually talk about Samsonov either. Well, okay. Before we move on to Samsonov, for or against the Keefe firing discourse? Like, no,
What I always say
not
is,
worthy.
if you're firing him, who are you bringing in? Okay, that's the first one there. Who are you bringing in? I
Mhm.
mean, some people are going to probably point to Craig Berube being out there right now as a guy that some might look at. But I always say that doing the coaching change for the sake of doing the coaching change doesn't always work. Look at what's going on with Ottawa right now. Edmonton, that was a team that was not playing to their potential and
But you can say the
started
same
playing
about
to their
Toronto.
potential.
Could say the same about
You
Toronto.
could, and to me, that's the one where it's like, I don't look. The thing with Sheldon Keefe is he's been here for so long that yes, the message does get stale. So if they did it, I wouldn't be surprised. I just don't think they're going to do it because they have not made that move There hasn't been any inkling that they would even consider making that move, and that's why I just don't
Yeah.
think they're going to do it.
I would guess though, like they probably just like Guy Boucher becomes the interim guy, I would
Yeah.
think. And then maybe they evaluate and see if they have a longer term solution in the summer if things don't get better under Boucher. I'm assuming that's what would happen. I'm not there yet. Like I'm not there yet. I do
I'm closer. I'm a
understand,
lot
like
closer than I was before. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not saying Sheldon Keefe is free from any blame.
it's
I'm like you. I'm not there yet.
it's honestly, it's just because of the fact, and it's unfair as a coach, but it's a hazard of the job. It's a lot easier to change one coach than to change multiple players. And if it's a DNA thing with the players, your only option is to change the coach because you're not gonna get a complete, overturn of this roster by the trade deadline. And this season means a lot for Toronto. You bet your ass it does. So we'll see. We'll see what then ends up happening. Um, Ilya Samsonov though came back his first game the other night against the Detroit Red Wings. He allowed 3 goals. You know what? I thought he was okay. I thought he looked alright, he wasn't as shaky in net. He made, a couple of big saves, especially early on to kinda keep the team in it.
Mhm.
I think that, Sammy put forward one of his better outings, the other night than he's had all season.
I think the big one here is you were more confident that he wasn't going to give up the backbreaking goal because he was making the big saves, right? Like
Mhm.
before the game winning goal, he made an unbelievable save, and then things kind of fell apart for him, and it was kind of unfair because things were so chaotic defensively. But yeah, I think for him it was get literally get that first save because that like even things like that were tough for him. So he was
Yeah.
establishing a rhythm. I think, yeah, were we surprised to see him in that? Absolutely. It didn't seem like they wanted to do it. But I think at least what it does is say we can put him back into the net for the next game.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah, I think he earned another start. Not that he is like, "Okay, we're going
He's not
Samsonov."
back to being the starter. No,
No,
but
he's not definitely not back to being the starter, and I don't even know if he, when Joseph Wool comes back, if, he's earned a spot over Martin Jones, like, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens there, obviously, but I think that for sure, like, is there a back-to-back coming up? I'm not sure if there's a back-to-back,
no.
but you think maybe at some point on this road trip, you try and get him another game? Maybe that's against Calgary, perhaps, Vancouver would be tough, maybe it's in Seattle, potentially. Like, I would think you would try and get him another game here before the All-Star break, but, yeah, I do have to say it was encouraging, maybe is the word. It was an encouraging start where
Yes.
it wasn't just like, "Okay, this guy has 0 confidence, and he shouldn't even put gear on anymore." Like, at least that was a notable NHL start, which I think earns him another one at some point here. All right, let's regroup, come back, and tee up tonight's game. Leafs in Edmonton. Got a little McDavid versus Matthews rivalry game once again tonight. We'll tee it up after a word from our sponsor. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Sleeper. It's almost the halfway point in this season, Leaf fans. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. It's the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is the #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Matthews or Marner or Nylander, McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, whoever will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 different player stats. You heard me, Leaf fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms and views for details and locational availability. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. It is a game day here for the Maple Leafs. They are about to embark on a pretty tough road trip here, Dave. They've got Edmonton tonight. Then they've got Calgary coming up. They're in Vancouver. They're in Seattle. Weirdly, they come back home, one game against the Jets, only to go back out west to play the Jets again in Winnipeg to close out the pre-All-Star schedule. So really bizarre schedule, but that's a tough schedule. It's a lot of travel, and that's some good hockey teams that are playing some very good hockey. Like you've got Edmonton, who's won literally 10 games in a row. Like this is the hottest team in the NHL. And then, Calgary's been a, roughly 500 team, but still a tough team to play against. And then you've got Vancouver, one of the best teams in hockey right now. Seattle's been one of the hotter teams in hockey, as have the Jets. So legit, you've got some tough opponents. You're on the road, lots of travel, tight schedule. Tonight will be big to start off that road trip against Edmonton. Try and start on a high footing, because this is 5-6 tough games in a row.
Yeah, I saw somewhere someone's like, "Oh, good thing for the Leafs to be going out on the road." And I'm like, "Did you not look and see who they're going to be playing on the road? Like that's guy. Like Edmund."
I'll say this though, like weirdly, doesn't it seem like that the Leafs though, like every time we look at a piece of the schedule, or every time we start to doubt this team, they do kind of fight back and gain the trust of falsely gain the trust of like Leaf fans again. Like it would be very Toronto-esque, where we're all sitting here looking at this daunting stretch coming up, where it's like, how are they going to get wins if they come out of this, with only picking up a win or two, or like 3 or 4 points over this stretch? It's gonna cripple them going forward. That should basically will say, put the nail in the coffin on their divisional odds. But usually that's when the Leafs do, like when their backs up against the wall during the regular season, kind of come up with some like big wins. I don't know. Am I wrong there?
Well, I mean, they've had success out in Western Canada, except for that one game against Edmonton. Was it last year that they got absolutely demolished by Edmonton in Edmonton? It was like right after the trade deadline, I think. Justin Hall fought in that game. Yeah, that was the game where McDavid just went all over him.
But we've also seen like Toronto. Remember when this might have been the bubble year? Like Matthews goes down. I think they ended up having to use like 3 goaltenders. It was definitely the bubble year, because it was when they were doing it was like a baseball format where they play like 3 games against the same team, just to limit travel. And I do recall like Matthews got hurt right before going out on that road trip, and they went in and they crushed Edmonton in like 3 straight games. Like they had a shutout in there, and like literally 3 different goalies. I think it was Campbell, it was Hutchinson, I think may have been the one who got the shutout, and then I guess at that point it would have been Fred Anderson. I guess would have been the other goalie who was there. Anderson in 2021, I think so.
Either him or Campbell.
Well, Campbell was there for sure, but I'm thinking because there's 3 different goalies. They picked up 3 goalies, 3 wins. But anyway, like that always kind of sticks out to me, where it's when this team is when you start to doubt the Leafs is usually when they turn things around and pick things up. And then once you start to get on board with them again, like a lot of the fan base was coming off of that the California road trip, where it's like, okay, this team's finally playing some good hockey. They're buying in defensively. They're limiting the mistakes. They're getting the puck out efficiently. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, we feel good about this squad. Now they're playing some tougher teams. And then boom, now they play like trash for 3 straight games. It's like, okay, never mind. The team is not as good as we thought they were, which means they're probably about to say, actually, we are good. I don't know.
It's tough right now because this team has been so inconsistent that you don't know what you're going to get. Exactly. And to me, look, sometimes people are saying, people are saying they have to face some sort of adversity during the regular season so that it would prepare them for the playoffs. But at the same time, with the way that they've been playing during the regular season, they have not looked anywhere close to a team that can compete in the playoffs. So I don't know on what scale like people were expecting from this Leafs team, but like that inconsistency has to be the first thing. If I'm Sheldon Keefe, you need to figure out how to get this team to play more consistently. Like,
I mean, I know they've got games in hand, obviously, but they're only 1 point up on both Detroit and Tampa. 1 point in a divisional spot.
yeah.
So, and again, they've got 2 games in hand on Detroit. They've got 3 games in hand on Tampa. So, there's a chance that it could even out, like in terms of win percentage. But you got to win some of these games because we could wake up by the end of this road trip if it does not go well. The Leafs could be out of the playoffs by the time the All-Star break hits, and it would not even shock me. Would not shock me at this point, given how tough of a schedule this is and how the Leafs have played. Wouldn't be a shocking scenario.
No, not at all. Again, with the Leafs, it feels like it can go either way. It's just how this season has gone for them.
Yeah, like, dude, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, Seattle, and then back to back, they've got the Winnipeg Jets. Outside of Calgary, like these have legitimately been 4 of the hottest teams in the league. So can Toronto go in there and be streak stoppers? Can they do that? We'll see. But certainly they've got to play a heck of a lot better than they did over the course of the weekend. If they play the same way they did against Colorado and against Detroit, I don't think they really stand a chance in any of these games the way that these teams and these clubs are playing right now. So they've got to kind of revert back to the way that they were playing in California, which is just like attention to detail, right? Simple things like not giving the puck. Like you mentioned the Frank Corrado clip that he played of Liljegren when he, ringed the puck around and gave it up in their own zone, wasn't able to clear it. Something as simple as that, where it's like, okay, just a simple little touch pass to the defender, to his, partner, McCabe would have nullified that. And he would have been able to, skate it up and get it out of harm's way. But instead, they give the puck up behind the goal and then they kind of break down out in front. Andrew Kopp finds some space, finds the back of the net, game was over. But if you don't have that and those mistakes, then I think there's an opportunity for Toronto to, win some hockey games. But to your point, they've been extremely, extremely inconsistent, especially in their own end. And teams like Edmonton, teams like Vancouver, they make you pay when you make those types of mistakes. So tonight, especially against McDavid and Draisaitl and Zach Hyman, who's on pace for 50 goals this year, do not give the puck up in your own end because those guys will make you pay. Like if we talk about what the keys to the game is going to be tonight, limit those turnovers, man. Gotta limit the turnovers because
Yeah.
if you give the puck up to McDavid and you break down, boy, things are not going to go well for you because those guys know how to score and make you pay.
Yeah, I honestly just there's so many things that this team is just not doing right, especially the turnovers, that you just get worried with a potential matchup against McDavid and like which defenseman do you trust to put out against McDavid right now, considering how things have gone?
Well, none is
Yeah.
the obvious answer. But here's the thing, if Sheldon Keefe was worried about McKinnon and Makar being on another planet, this guy Connor McDavid also on another planet when it comes to his hockey skills. And Draisaitl's right in the same
Yeah.
camp as a McKinnon as well. So yeah, good luck to whoever has to defend that squad tonight. I'd imagine the Leafs go back to their classic lines. Like I
Yeah.
would be shocked if we see the same lineup again that we saw in Detroit. Absolutely floored. I do not expect that to be the case. Like as much as you want to reward Pontus Holmberg for playing some good hockey, guy's not a first line talent. Come on now. Like let's be real. Like that was almost a slap in the face what he did against the Detroit Red Wings, which even, maybe that was some money on the board type of stuff for Detroit there, where it's like this guy's just jumping up the lines thinking that they can still win a game against us because we came in late, yada yada. Ah, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know where I was going with that. I guess
So
just looking back on the weekend again, but I think we should probably see the Lions revert back to what we know has worked for the squad over the course of the last little bit.
yeah, like if he was expecting again, if he was expecting those lines to somehow awaken this team, it did the opposite effect. So that's
Yeah.
like a coaching blunder on Sheldon Keefe's part. But yeah, like go back to what was working on that California road trip, right? Like I even think like Giordano shouldn't play either, just because you need to actually be able to defend against Edmonton's speed, and Giordano's probably the last
Yeah.
guy I would want out there in
You
that.
trust Timmins though? You trust Timmins in his own end?
I mean, I would have rather seen I don't know what Lagesson needs to do to get back into a game here. I thought he was playing quite well
Yeah.
before he got
Yeah.
benched.
Could go Lagesson, I
Former
suppose.
team too, like going up against. I think pretty sure he played against Edmonton.
Yep.
Like,
Yep. No, you're right, actually. Maybe that's something to kind of keep an eye on when the lineups come out during morning skate or during line rushers if Lagesson is out there on the ice, because I think that would probably make some sense. Because I don't think Timmins played well enough to garner another game. So if you're gonna do that again, I mean, maybe they put Geo back in the game, which I think is possible too. Um, or they can save him for the next night and get him back in against Calgary, or Lagesson ends up getting in. I wouldn't take out Benoit. I would probably keep Simon Benoit in the lineup. I think
yeah,
he's deserving of it, obviously, the way that he's been playing of late. But outside of that, yeah, I don't know how many other different players we see in and out of the lineup tonight. Probably go back to what was working, back in the California road trip. All right, buddy, let's wrap things up here. That'll do it for us today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms to receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.